Welcome to the Young and Hungry. In order to start a good chili, you must first begin the night before, because unfortunately, you know you can't afford canned beans. I know you can't afford canned beans. As such, you're forced to relegate yourself to the Goya aisle, where you will find dried beans. Now, unlike their canned cousins, these require a great deal of work, in the sense that you literally need to put bean and water together and let them sit for at the very least 10 hours. Now you'll see here I'm using a cup of black beans, mostly because they're the cheapest. However, in the name of plate presentation, I also cut these with half a cup of pinto beans. Given the fact these are going to be going into a chili, this just gives a little bit better plate presentation, though it does not make that big of a difference. If you're content with just using black beans, that's entirely up to you. Following that, you'll notice that I lost control of the bag here, which means there's going to be a few extra pinto beans than expected. Now, if you do this, I would highly recommend you completely give up and change your cooking methods, as it means there is no hope, and there's really no point in continuing to try. Now, with regards to how much water you can put in, it honestly does not matter that much so long as you have, at the very least, I would say the beans are completely submerged with change. Because the deal is, these are going to be sitting in a chili pot for a while, so they're going to get to the right moisture level regardless. Now, with regards to the meat you're going to have to use, given the fact if you're watching this, you're likely poor, and if you're using this recipe, you're likely not really the kind of people that are going to be lucky enough to find the 95% meat hamburger. As such, you'll be relegated to the glory that is the tubes. Now, with your pot sufficiently heated to ground meat, you begin to squeeze out the meat. Much like toothpaste, you're designed to waste 10% of the product with this packaging method. But, as I cannot afford more, I will continue to work every little bit of it that I can out. Now, you'll notice that these are 20% fat. Given that this is a chili, that does not distinctively mean much. The deal is, this browns your meat and cooks that fat out enough that we're going to be able to flavor it with the right seasoning, and that'll carry on the flavor of what's going to become our meal for the next week. Now, using 2 pounds, a cup and a half of dried beans, you're probably going to get roughly 8 to 10 meals, depending on how hungry you are. Yep, and you just hear it sizzling in there, nice and good. And, yep. Now that we have the meat squeezed out of the tubes, we begin the long and arduous process of browning it. This is what will take up the bulk of the time with regards to actual input cooking. Given the fact with how densely packed the meat was, it's going to be a while to break it down to a level of consistency that's actually functional for what we need. So yep, you just start by chopping it up a little bit, chop it up into segments, let it brown, chop it up some more, let it brown. Oh yeah, the steam's coming up nice. And that's the thing, when you're doing something like chili, the leanness of the meat doesn't really matter. Like, the reason why I chose this hamburger was because it was on the 5 for $25 rack at my local grocery store, which means I not only got this hamburger, but I also managed to get 2 packs of thinly cut pork chops and 2 chicken breasts. So that was pretty much going to be my meat for the next 3 weeks. Yep, you just keep cooking, keep chopping. The deal is you want it all to be roughly as uniform as humanly possible. Unfortunately, when you're cutting things with a bamboo spoon, there's really not much hope you have there. And as that keeps going, you'll notice it's starting to get a little bit more brown. You go ahead and do your first flip over. Now, one thing that's fun about chili, though, is you can make it as wonderful or as horrible as you choose to. For example, if you're feeling very ostentatious, you can order a bag of Scoop Fritos. But now it's flavor time. The flavor we're using here is a pack of Williams chili seasoning, which, in my opinion, is optimal for the task. Now you might be asking, why am I only using 1 pack when it's supposed to be 1 pack for 1 pound of meat? Well, it's simple. I know you can't afford the $150. I know I can't afford the extra $150. As such, we will just have to make do with one, given the fact the rest of your grocery budget had to go to buying your 2-liter to get your soda fix for the week. You just mix that in, you stir it in. One thing that's kind of nice about having a high fat content hamburger for this is the fact that it absorbs the flavoring a lot more aggressively. Because if you're working with a lean meat, you'll naturally have the beef flavor a lot stronger versus working with something fatty where you have a little bit more room to change it. Yeah, you just try to mix it in, try to mince the meat up a little bit smaller to get it to the right consistency. All in all, it's a relatively time-consuming process. It gets relatively boring, but just like making rice, it's not really there for the fun. It's there because you need to maintain enough sustenance to keep this mortal coil going for another week. After all, if you don't put in calories, you can't go to work. And if you can't go to work, well, what good did you really achieve? Yeah, we're making good progress. Another thing I like about Williams is it gives a very good color to the chili. Now, in another life, I would have gotten to use 2 packets, which would have made it significantly better, but you know how it is. Times are tough. And unfortunately, I don't think Dave Ramsey was correct when he said you have to live off of rice and beans until you reach your goals. No. Transparently speaking, a lot of financial advice that our generation has been given has not aged very well in the slightest. Most of them didn't really pan for a global pandemic or the fact that the bachelor's degree that we all went over $20,000 in debt for would inevitably not exactly translate to a higher standard of living or a better job. Now, as we can see here, the meat's roughly done. It's all a consistent coloration. It looks like the seasonings went in. And you see we have enough moisture in there that we can start adding more liquids. And one of the liquids we're going to be adding is diced tomatoes in the form of canned Rotel. In this situation, we're going to use 2 cans, one being hot and one being regular. This should provide extra moisture and, above all, add some tomatoey flavor, which is good. Now, as you can see here, I have to struggle to get the can open because I'm too much of a coward to actually take it off the entire way. That is the regular Rotel, for anyone wondering. And this is the spicy Rotel. And in case you're wondering, this is where the extra Williams chili seasoning budget went. There was a sale on canned Rotel, and I decided to splurge. Now, after we mix that in nice and decent, that gives our meat a little bit more dimension and gives a different texture as opposed to just meat and beans. But, of course, we're about to be introduced to the star of the show in the beans themselves. This is much like flour, is designed to be a filler to add a degree of nutritional density to this rather than it just being a pan of boiled meat. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but unfortunately I believe there does need to be a level of nutritional density in things you eat. And there we go. Also, it stretches out the meal a lot further. So this is just a simple mixture of black and pinto beans that have been allowed to sit in water overnight. After you mix those bad boys together, you have effectively all of the components of chili all together. Now, after a good stir, one of the things about chili that is kind of difficult, mostly due to impatience, is the first bowl of chili you get out of this is the worst one. Chili is often better if it's allowed to sit for a few hours before you take your first bowl out. 1, because it gives a chance for all of the flavors to become friends, but 2, it softens the beans and lets everything mellow out a little bit more. If one piece of flavor was too condensed and the other piece was not, that fixes it. As for adding water, don't worry, the beans are going to absorb the rest of that because unfortunately beans do need to be stewed even after they've been soaked. And just like that, that's going to be your meal for the next week. I hope you like it. And remember, chili is all about pairing. As long as you have something crunchy, something sweet, something to go with it at all, it's pretty worthwhile. Anyway, thank you for joining me again as we try to maintain ourselves despite not really wanting to. And I hope you enjoy your chili. A good day to you all. Goodbye.